Again, it's a privilege to be here, to see old faces, old friends, and to meet crocodile enthusiasts. Yes. To start off the keynote speeches, I will be giving you a short overview of the first forum, which happened 12 years ago. And I'll be showing you the salient points that transpired in that first gathering. But first, let me acknowledge the following institutions and members of these institutions. The DNR, of course, the DA, UPLB and UPLB MNH, CPPI, and the major sponsors. And I wish to highlight the hard work of the organizers, Rainier Manalo, Dr. Terry Aquino, Jake, Philip, and the team from CPPI. Allow me to dedicate this short presentation to a fallen comrade of ours, who has championed Philippine biodiversity research and conservation in the past 2 decades. So basically what went before, the first forum, as mentioned, happened in the National Museum of the Philippines, in the building there in Manila, right smack in Manila, back in 2007, 12 years ago. It was a huge success. And this is what has happened there. It was held from January to February 2007 and held at the Museum of the Filipino People. It's now called the National Museum of Anthropology in Manila. The hosts at that time were the following: National Museum, Suleiman University, the Veterinary Office of the City of Manila, and of course CPTI. And as we all know, the forum was envisioned by Andy Ross and his partner, Angel Alcala, the amazing duo in crocodile research. Basically, they pioneered crocodile research in the Philippines, as we all know. And we had 125 participants coming from 4 different countries. And among the topics that were presented include the following: cultural and indigenous knowledge, results of field surveys, new distribution records of both species, husbandry and breeding diseases, genetics, commercial breeding, and a total of 7 resolutions were drafted. I will later on give you a summary of those resolutions, which would be those resolutions would be quite instrumental, since we will use them as a kind of a metric to see where this second forum will be headed. And the goals of the first CrocForum were the following. Basically, it was a venue for a Filipino dialogue where conservation biologists, crocodile biologists, researchers, and so on can have a venue to talk with each other. People from science and from government, and especially from the commercial partners. The forum actually played a major role in introducing research and conservation of crocodiles to our commercial farmers, who are very important and playing a key role, especially at this time. The second goal was to focus on the plight of the blue species, and not just the Philippine crocodile. National scientist Angel Alcala in that forum actually did an analysis, and he was very concerned that that forum, the first crocodile forum, didn't discuss much about the status of the Indo-Pacific crocodile. Since most of the presentations at that time focused on the Philippine crocodile. And he was hoping to have a balance that this second forum could also mention researches and analyze the situation of the Indo-Pacific crocodile population in the Philippines. And the third goal was to harmonize goals of conservation and management with sustainable utilization. Again, this is where the industry comes in. The resolutions adopted totaled in 7, but I have chopped it down to the following categories. The first one is that's something to do a lot with education, and the second is about institutionalizing crocodile conservation by way of legislations, policies, and of course habitat conservation was also emphasized. There were actually at least 2 resolutions passed during that forum. Conservation breeding again was also passed. And among the important goals of the forum was to investigate how and where captive bred populations of Crocodiles mandurensis would be introduced into the wild, especially in natural habitats. Later on, I will show you some of the milestones that we have achieved based on those resolutions. And then the forum strongly urged enacting legislation that will protect and conserve both species and habitats. So just to give you an idea on what has occurred 12 years ago up to this point, by way of releases of captive bred sea mandurensis, Crocodiles mandurensis, we have at least 3 areas now across the Philippines wherein wild releases or reintroductions have been proven to be successful. There were and there are releases ongoing in the Sierra Madre Mountains of Luzon. And of course, recently there was a hugely successful release done in Siargao Island in southern Philippines, a tiny island just east of Mindanao. And there also has been a release of captive bred mandurensis in a crocodile farm with a natural setting in Davao, in the city of Davao. Not in the city, right, but in the outskirts. So again, successful releases of the species have been done in northeastern regions of Luzon. There have been dozens of studies monitoring the populations. People from the Philippines, especially led by the Mabuhay Foundation, in collaboration with the DNR and other international organizations, have been leading this effort. Most recently, there is a celebrated release in the island of Siargao, and this was well supported by the local communities and the local government units. And we wish to emphasize that the reason why the Siargao release was very successful because all of the ingredients were there, especially support from the local communities, support from the local government offices, and support from government department, especially the environment department. And then a small population was also released in the farm of actually the CPPI president, Senator Laguna. The population is still doing well, sir, sa pag-asa. All right. Second is I wish to emphasize that since 2007, there have been heightened activities involving NGOs in partnerships with academia, schools, local governments, people's organizations in basically drumming up public support, to make to make especially, how do I say, to make the plight of the conservation of the species to be popular. And there have been a lot of activities done in northern Luzon and also in southern Philippines to that effect. Let me mention some. The CPPI has been leading a lot of public awareness campaigns down in Mindanao and also in SEARCA. The DNR's Palawan Wildlife Rescue Center, Palawan Wildlife Rescue and Conservation Center has been doing a lot of similar efforts in Palawan. And the Mabuhay Foundation, in partnership with local groups, have been doing a lot of public awareness campaigns also in northern Luzon. There's also increased availability of technical and popular materials, basically to highlight the status of the two species of crocodiles and their habitats. And many of these have been also, apart from written in English, they have also been translated into various languages and dialects. Since 2007, we saw also a significant increase in publications involving the two species, which is great because since 1950s, there have been only very few publications about the crocodiles in the Philippines, and mostly these were led by either Andy Ross, Dr. Alcala, or our international partners from the US and Europe. But now, a lot of the Filipinos are doing research and publishing as well. Another milestone that we achieved since 2007 is the holding of the first ever meeting of the Crocodile Specialist Group here in Manila. It was led by the CPPI in partnership with a lot of institutions, including the DNR International Museum. In fact, most of you were there, and it was a success. It was a big party, actually. A lot of people were drunk almost every night, especially Korea, I think. And then another highlight that we wish to emphasize is the DNR through BNB has finally reconstituted the National Committee on Crocodile Conservation. And this time the team is composed of a lot of representatives from government offices and also with NGOs. And most of the members are locally based. We've been meeting since 2013, and the NCCC, as we call it, is also supporting this effort, the Crocodile Forum. And finally, along with as well, the BNB has also updated the management plan for this time for the two species of crocodiles in the country. And the lead writer is Dr. Terry Aquino, and I believe this will also be one of the subjects that we will be discussed during this forum. So now, for my final slides, let me just highlight some of the issues and challenges that we are still facing. And for the first few slides, allow me to, I want to highlight on publications, research activities, and funding involving local institutions. So I made a kind of a diagram here showing the proportion of the amount of research and conservation activities being done by various organizations. And the two biggest icons are NGOs, actually, because these are the two major entities, groups that are doing research and conservation activities currently in the Philippines of both species. But I wish to point out that there are also academic institutions involved, such as the Isabela State University, University of Southern Mindanao, Silliman University, of course, because of the legacy of Dr. Alcala. UP, University of Santa Tomas is also doing some work. And a small NGO, ISLA. These were the guys who discovered the population in a tiny island north of Luzon. So basically, this is what we know about research and conservation efforts. Again, let me emphasize that it is being led by NGOs. And I believe the academe and the government should really put their act together so as to contribute as well. Now the second is publications. Again, we see increased publication on various aspects about the two species. And the two, again, the same organizations dominate the scene in terms of publications, CPPI and Mabubaya. They have produced books, publications, so on and so forth. But we can also see the contributions from the academia. But we need more contributions actually. And programs are needed, especially like crocodile funding, grants would definitely contribute a lot to help encourage students and faculty or researchers from universities to get into the mainstream of crocodile research as well. And finally, funding. So from a lot of entities, now we have only 3 left. The major groups that basically have available resources to do conservation work are the government, but they pale in comparison to the resources that are available from the NGOs. Especially I wish to mention the richest guys are in CPPI, so we need to ask them for money. Just kidding. Well, they keep giving a lot of support to do conservation work in the Philippines. So major issues, we all know this. Most of these have been tackled in the first forum, but there are now a few players, new players. Human-crocodile conflict still, is at the top. Basically, human-crocodile conflict and human and habitat loss, you cannot actually split them, or you cannot tell them apart. They're pretty complicated and intertwined. The more we lose habitats because of human encroachments, then the more we see heightened increase of human-crocodile conflict. It's the same all over the Philippines and Southeast Asia and Asia. As we, especially now because of heightened development in the Philippines, especially mining, many of our remaining wetlands and terrestrial ecosystems are shrinking and fragmentizing, thereby making habitat, having less available habitat for the two species. And then finally, the major issues now that the two species are facing are, apart from human-crocodile conflict and habitat loss, are illegal wildlife trade. This will be, actually a paper will be presented later on about this. The dynamics of the illegal trade in the Philippines is pretty complicated as well. It is intertwined with those of Asia, especially now that there are countries in Asia the economies are getting much better, and with a richer economy, and it drives basically the illegal trade. Poaching is still happening. Members of the Crocodile Committee in the Guasan March in Mindanao a few months ago, and we saw this firsthand. And many researchers from Mindanao and CPPI have been documenting how poaching both species of crocodiles for many, many years now, since 2007. Alien species is also becoming a great concern. We have seen non-indigenous crocodile species here in the Philippines as well, especially after episodes of floodings. And then another issue that keeps on turning up since the first forum is the genetic integrity of the populations of both species in the Philippines. Several papers have discussed the possibility of hybridization between Crocodilus mindorensis and Crocodilus porosus. And with that, I thank you for listening.